All right, let's have a little look at Tommy Robinson discussing Christianity.
Are you religious at all, Tommy?
I'm being pushed more to. I wasn't.
Tell me about it.
I'll tell you about. As I've watched as we've gone on, and I see Christianity totally under attack. Yeah, my mum's a devout Catholic. My mum is, yeah, but I've felt betrayed.
He's not meaning betrayed by political power. Well, he is. He's meaning betrayed by the kind of socio-cultural, Dawkins cultural Christianity. I think that's what he's meaning, not from within the church itself, which of course is where the real Trojan horse is. The real damage is done by lukewarm compromise, false teachers, false preachers, and a false church.
I remember when I started the English Defence League, I spoke to Deacon Jerry at the church and said, I'm struggling with Islam, massively struggling. The more I've looked into it, the more I understand who Muhammad was. And he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And he got to the point where he said, forgive us our trespasses if we forgive those who trespass against us. And he made a point of that. I said, forgive them. That's your answer. Christianity wouldn't still be here if it was that weak, yeah?
It's actually a really interesting point that if you think about how anti-Christ culture is, if you think about how anti-Jesus Christ culture is, and yet there is still a faithful witness, it's an amazing thought to think there is any faithful witness. That's the reality of what we're doing. And Jesus said he would build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. That's essentially what he's recognising.
What Christianity now has become, I believe the church has been infiltrated by Marxists who don't even believe in Jesus or God, yeah? And they've used it for their own political agenda.
I mean, talk about a prophetic voice. This guy's not a Christian yet, and we pray, having seen this and just listening to him in the last few days, that he does encounter Christ soon. But what an amazing thing to hear Tommy say, that the infiltration of socio-political agendas, Marxist or otherwise, really has made and rendered the church the way that it is, which is a laughingstock. It is impotent, it is apostate, there's no other way of saying it, but he's recognising that. Why the church not recognising that?
To push their own political messages. Transgenderism, the Pope inviting 200 trannies into... It's insanity, yeah? It's insanity, but what we've done by destroying Christianity and losing faith in Christianity is leave a void. And that void's being filled. And lots of young men are converting to Islam. Islam is strong.
This is why I wrote The Glorious Few back in 2017, when I first started thinking about it, and then wrote it last year in 2023. What he's just said, Mary and I were talking about this, if there was any physical way of getting that book that I've written into his hands, wouldn't it be the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that would lead him to Christ? That in his expert activism and journalism regarding all of this stuff to do with Islam, but also to do with the powers that be that controlled the narrative, so that when you hear the name Tommy Robinson, what do you think? Well, you could end up easily thinking what the BBC want you to think about him, or the corrupt courts, or the corrupt judges, or the corrupt councils, or whoever it is, when in actual fact he's recognising that there's something profound about a church that has lost its prophetic witness, and that a void has happened that's then been filled by Islam.
I hand it to Islam. It's strong on its principles. It will not bow down. It will not change its path. Yeah? I admire it in certain parts.
You have to.
I admire it.
There is something admirable about these men having such a devout faith.
Listening to two men stood on the shores of the Thames opposite the Houses of Parliament talking about exactly what I've talked about in parts of The Glorious Few, that there is something admirable about this faith that, while reprehensible and abhorrent and ultimately just false and antichrist, there is something that is a lesson. This is why I wrote The Glorious Few, because it is the apex counterfeit, that if we're willing to listen, we'll show the church who we are supposed to be. And that's what they mean when they talk about being admirable, when Salman Abedi walks into Manchester Arena and does what he did. It's disgusting, reprehensible, but there is something admirable when people, their actions marry and reconcile with their confession, with their statement of faith, which of course is the exact opposite of the church.
It's admirable. There's something impressive about it.
It's admirable, but it's not a buffet, yeah?
It's not a smorgasbord.
which will say, well, okay, so you take the bits you like. Well, what about this bit? What about the verses that say this? You can't ignore that. Yeah?
I know.
That's a problem. Yeah? But I see that the more I've seen the satanic symbolism, I know these things would be seen as conspiracy theories. The more I see Christianity under attack in America and across Europe, the more it draws me towards it. The more I believe, the more I see evil and Satanism, which we're seeing, the more I see that, the more there has to be the other side. So for the first time I said, I'm pushing that way more now than ever.
This is the ultimate conclusion. When you notice that Tommy there was speaking with great conviction, but the guy who was interviewing him, when Tommy was talking about the obviousness of evil, the obviousness of the increase of lawlessness and evil, he kind of like acknowledged what he was saying, but he didn't agree enthusiastically. He wasn't animated by that. And that's the thing, is that if you're prepared to see and wrestle mentally with the evil that we're seeing, an unchurched person of no faith has to acknowledge that evil is very real, is very obvious, and if we're going to be really honest, is not getting better. What that ultimately will do is lead us to the inevitable conclusion that if evil exists, it must also be true that good exists. And you move beyond that, it's only a short step to then recognise that you have to then start thinking about the origins of both, and that's what Tommy has just said. We pray for him. Tom, if you happen to watch this, which is highly unlikely, or if anybody else, please get in touch and we will make sure that you get a copy of The Glorious Few to you immediately.